The old grandfather clock stood in the hallway. It had been there forever. The Miller family didn't know where it came from. They didn't really even like it. But it had been in the house when they moved in, so they left it there. Every hour the clock chimed. Bong, bong, bong. The sound echoed through the house. It was creepy. But that was nothing compared to what was about to happen. One night, a storm raged outside. Rain lashed against the windows, wind howled like a wolf. The lights flickered and then went out. The house was plunged into darkness. Suddenly the grandfather clock began to chime. Bong, bong, bong. But this time it was different. The chimes were louder, more urgent, like a warning. Tommy Miller, the 16-year-old son, was walking by the clock. He was on his way to the kitchen for a snack. As he passed the clock, it chimed. Bong! Tommy felt strange, dizzy. His vision blurred. He reached out to steady himself. His hand felt small, tiny. He looked down. His hand was the hand of a toddler. Tommy screamed. His voice was high-pitched, babyish. He stumbled back from the clock in horror. Tommy's scream brought his parents and sister running.
Tommy, what's wrong?
His mother, Susan, asked, but when they saw Tommy, they gasped in horror. He wasn't their teenage son anymore. He was a tiny child, wearing Tommy's clothes, which were now enormous on him. Before anyone could speak, the grandfather clock chimed again. Bong! And then again, bong, bong! Ah! This time it was Tommy's father, John, who cried out. He was getting younger, right before their eyes. He shrank and shrank until he was a helpless newborn. Susan stared from her husband to her son. This couldn't be happening. Then she felt a strange tingling sensation. She looked at her reflection in the glass of a framed photo on the wall. Her reflection was changing. Her hair was turning grey. Wrinkles appeared on her face.
Mom, you're old!
Susan watched in horror as her reflection aged 40 years in a matter of seconds. She was now an old woman.
She looked down at her hands. They were wrinkled and bony.
The clock chimed again. Bong!
Emily cried out. She was changing too, growing older, but not old like Susan. Emily was turning into a teenager, an older version of herself.
Susan knew she had to do something. She had to stop the clock. She ran to the garage. She grabbed an axe. Her old bones ached, but she had to be strong for her family. Susan ran back to the hallway. She raised the axe above her head. She was going to smash the clock, destroy it. But as she swung the axe, the clock's hands began to spin. Faster and faster, the clock chimed rapidly.
Bong, 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 bong.
Susan felt a searing pain shoot through her body. The axe fell from her grasp. She was getting older by the second. She looked in the mirror again. Her hair was now snow white. Her face was a mask of wrinkles. She looked ancient. With her last ounce of strength, Susan lurched forward. She slammed her entire weight into the clock. It smashed into 1,000 pieces. The chimes stopped. The house was silent, except for the sound of their heavy breathing. Slowly, painfully, Susan looked around.
Her husband was back to normal. So was her son. Her daughter was her old self again, thank goodness. But Susan was still an old woman. The clock had taken her youth. She collapsed to the floor. Her family rushed to her side.
Mom, are you okay?
Emily cried, but Susan could barely speak. She was too weak, too old. The clock might have been destroyed, but the nightmare was just beginning.